Hey guys, it's Carolyn. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're diving into another section of Quick Getting Screwed, the book. Like I said, if you're interested in what the book says, it's available on Amazon. There's 20 chapters of all of the things that you should know about before you take the risk of signing a commercial subcontract, things that can affect your business that you should know before you sign. And all of these things are kind of standard in most commercial subcontracts. So in today's episode, I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about subcontractors' bonds or bonds in general as it deals with bonding a project like in a contract, right? So generally where we see bonds is in public works, right? So as a contractor, if that you remain unpaid, you can file a lien on a project where you provided labor and material and have been unpaid, right? And that's your security. You file a lien against a project, you're secured, right? Well, on public works project, you cannot file a lien. So the general idea with government and government entities is that they have what's called government immunity, which means they can't be sued. They're protected from all of that. And so on a public project, you cannot file a lien, right? So what the law provides is that you have to have a bond. So a bond takes the place of being able to file a lien. You'd file a bond claim to secure the amount that you're owed, right? So normally bonds are required on public projects. And so bonds usually start from the general contractor, right? Whatever public entity, whether it's federal, state, local, city, is hiring a general contractor. And normally if their project, and it varies state by state, normally if the project's over $25,000, they have to require the general contractor, to get a bond for the entire amount of the project. And usually there's two bonds, right? The general contractor is required to get a performance bond and a payment bond, right? So the performance bond, the general contractor is required to get, guarantees that to the government entity that the general contractor will do the work, complete the work for the price stated, right? And if for some reason the general contractor gets fired or abandons a job, the public entity can file on that bond to get paid the remaining balance to finish the project, right? The other part of that is the payment bond. So the payment bond guarantees that everybody that supplies labor or material will be paid. So it basically takes the place of filing a lien. So instead of filing a lien, you file a bond claim on the general contractor's bond if you are not paid, right? So that's kind of the purpose of the bonds. And so normally, if the general contractor is required to get a bond, they will also require the subcontractors to get a bond. And it's the same kind of bond, a performance bond and a payment bond. But the one thing that's different is, you're buying a bond, you have to go to a company, usually it's an insurance company, but a bond is not insurance, meaning that if a general contractor or a public entity files on a bond and the bond company has to pay out for performance bond to finish the job or a payment bond, the bond company will go after whoever got that bond to be reimbursed, right? So when you go to get a bond, you have to give your credit info, you got to sign a personal guarantee, give all of this information. And the reason for that is they're basically taking a risk that if you don't perform like you're supposed to, they're going to have to pay the bond company. But the way the bonds are written, if the bond company has to pay, they're going to come after you for whatever they have to pay. So that being said, as a subcontractor, be very careful when you get a bond, right? Because you're now guaranteeing that you're going to do all the work for the price stated and you're going to pay everybody that works for you. If you don't, the general contractor will file on your bond. And then the bond company you can either, end up in a dispute with the bond company or they will pay out. And if they pay out, they're coming after you. So this becomes important that a bond is not insurance, right? If they pay out, it's not just an insurance you provide for, they're coming after you for whatever they paid. If you're required to get a bond, get to know the bond company, get to know your agent that you're dealing with. So that way, if a bond claim is filed, they won't just automatically pay it, right? You want to have a chance to defend and protect and say, hey, this is why you should not pay. I'm trying to finish, or, my material supplier hasn't been paid because they haven't paid me. So if you're required to get a bond, you're going to have to sign your life away to get it, but get to know the company, get to know the people. That way you'll have a chance at trying to defend it if a bond claim is filed against you. One of the other things you can do as a subcontractor, if you're going into a contract that requires you to get a bond, that means the general contractor's got a bond and you need a copy of that. And here's why. Because if you don't get paid, your material suppliers can file on your bond, but you need to be able to file on the general contractor's bond if they're the one who hasn't paid you, right? It's kind of unfair that if you can't pay anybody because you haven't been paid, that you don't have a right of recovery. So a couple of things, if you're talking about working on a bonded project, know that it's not insurance. Also, get a copy of the general contractor's bond before you sign the contract or shortly thereafter. It's always easier to get a copy of the bond when there's not an issue. Later on, when things get in dispute, it may be harder to get a copy of the bond because they're not really recorded anywhere. You have to get them from the general contractor or from a public information request, which can take up to 30 days. So I say that to say bonded projects, all public works are going to be bonded, but know what you're getting into and the risk that you're taking, and make sure that you understand the contract that you're signing, because if you're terminated or you're fired or you walk the job, the general contractor will file on your bond to complete it. And then you'll be on the hook to pay back the bond company. So, also if you're required to get a bond in the contract and you're getting it at the beginning that in the full contract amount, that's great. If you're required to get a bond in the middle of the project, which is very odd, that would be a red flag. But only get it for the remaining amount of the contract, not the full amount. That way you're not on the hook for work you've already been paid for. So if you have more questions about contractor bonds, feel free to reach out to me on the website, send me an email. I'm all over social media. It's kind of a complex idea. I say that just to say, hey, it's dangerous and you should dive in and learn more before you just go out and get a bond. Hey guys, I'm here to help. If you have any questions, please reach out at thecromingslawfirm.com. Thanks.